Good morning, everybody. I woke up today thinking it was Friday, but it's Thursday, so I'm already having a bad day. But you're about to have a good day because a great episode of GoJo and Golic is coming your way. Ballot talk, baby. All right, the semifinalists have been announced for the NFL Hall of Fame. We will talk about that. Plus, NBA ratings taking a dip, perhaps. We might have a solution. We'll talk about that. And Thursday trap. All right, the 8-2 Steelers are taking on the 2-8 Browns. But could this be a trap game? I don't know. We'll discuss. All that and more coming your way on GoJo and Golic.
What's up, everybody? Welcome to GoJo and Golic. Mike Golic Jr., Mike Golic Sr., Jesse Cofield here. We are presented by Campbell's Chunky, the soup that eats like a meal, and we got a great show for you today. Make sure you download, subscribe, rate, review us, leave us a 5-star rating. Check us out here live Monday through Friday, 8 to 10 a.m. Eastern on the DraftKings Network. Subscribe to our new YouTube channel, GoJo and Golic on YouTube. Hit the bell. Know when we're going live here. Fitzy going to join us in the second hour of the show, usually here on a Wednesday, which kind of explains. See, we have tried to create some tentpole guests on this show that help you understand, hey, this is where the ebb and flow of the week is here. You get Marshall Newhouse on Monday on the show. You get Charlotte Wilder on a Tuesday, even though we say it's on a Wednesday. And usually Jason Fitz is in the Wednesday spot here. And so, Jesse, in my mind, Dad, in my mind, that's a lot like when I get on a plane and travel, much like you are this week, Dad. During the week, as soon as I step foot in the airport, in my brain, it becomes Friday. So everything that happens after that is totally counterintuitive, Dad. I don't know how you're doing it. You're on your second stop of the week right now. And so Jason Fitz will join us today to try and remedy some of that confusion. But once I get on the airplane or anything like that, it is over.
Well, for me, I don't wonder what day it is. I wonder what city I'm in. I flew to Philadelphia Tuesday night and was there yesterday, and then flew to Cleveland Wednesday night. And when I get off the plane, I walk out into the concourse and I just have to kind of stop and get my bearings. I don't know if that's a travel thing or an age thing. I don't know. I hope it's just a travel thing and not an age thing, but I have to kind of regroup and say, okay, where am I? What time zone am I in? And what am I here for?
Yeah, that
no,
makes
I tell you
sense.
when I will do that most is hotel bedrooms on the road, where all of a sudden, if I've been in too many cities in too short of a time period, I'll wake up in the morning and have to very quickly recalibrate. Where the hell am I? Because for a moment, I'll have believed I woke up in my room. There's that slight split second of panic, and then it ultimately settles in to remind me that I'm in some random place like this. It's also a good reminder for us today, as we are going to get to a number of things. My father, Mike Golic Sr., who's usually on the call for Sunday Night Football with Westwood One, is on the call for Thursday Night Football this week. So you get to go back to your hometown of Cleveland, Ohio, and get to watch the Browns and the Steelers, where if you're wondering, how are things going in Cleveland amidst this skid right now? Deshaun Watson being injured and the questions about his future being asked. It's going so well ahead of Thursday Night Football tonight against the division rival and the Steelers that we've got DeJuan Jones, they're now injured, one of the other injured players on this roster, tackle, beefing publicly on social media with some guy named Adam the Bull over comments made publicly about DeJuan Jones's weight on air. So that's where we've arrived at as you rolled into town.
Yeah, that's, listen, this is what happens when a season has gone bad. And I've been on losing seasons where the focus of the team goal is gone, right? It's win the division, make the playoffs, make a run. That's kind of the order of things that you're trying to accomplish. And when that's over, and I've talked about this many times, and this is just the way it is, at some point in the season, it becomes self-preservation. You know, how do I secure my job? And everybody on a team has a different, state on the team. You know, they're either a ingrained starter, or they're barely hanging on, or they're somewhere in the middle. And for DeJuan Jones, who, it was a starter and got hurt, and all of a sudden now he's worried about what people are saying about him because now he's not playing anymore. He took over for Jedrick Wills, who a couple weeks ago said he had a business decision in not playing in a game, so he was benched for Jones, and now Jones got hurt. I mean, it's what happens again when you're 28 and you have no direction for your team, and everybody is kind of out for themselves. You're playing the play called on offense and the play called on defense. Don't get me wrong, you're still playing as a team, but you're so much more worried about your individual play and where is that going to lead you in the next year or the year after, depending on, like I said, your statue on the team or your contract situation.
Yeah, we're in very close to for who, for what mode right now for this Browns team, who is dealing with all of those problems here now. And listen, going into a week, on a short week on Thursday Night Football, where the Cleveland Browns have won 8 straight games on Thursday, including 2 of the last 5 years over the Pittsburgh Steelers in this division. And so you've got some historical precedent, but you zoom in on this current situation where, Dad, we're a year removed from Kevin Stefanski winning Coach of the Year, and now we're fielding questions about the future for him and Andrew Berry's jobs. That's how bad this season's gone. And I'm curious for you, Dad, because so much of this hinges on a lot of people look at the Cleveland Browns and say, oh, the Haslams did all of this here. But for Andrew Berry and Kevin Stefanski, I'd imagine a quarterback decision of this magnitude didn't get signed off on without them being at least interested or involved in this process. And some of that's been indicated by reporting over the last couple of months. And so how do you think these two fare when it's all said and done? They both got contract extensions last summer. Do you think they're ultimately in their same positions with the Browns this time next year?
I do. I think there are a lot more tenuous situations for GMs and coaches in the league than in Cleveland. I think everyone can listen. It's the one thing, coaches, GMs, owners, they all have egos and they never want to admit they made a mistake. But this mistake has slapped them so hard in the face that they have made this mistake that they can't hide from it. They can't talk around it, and they can't try and massage it. Bad choice of words. They can't. They can't in any way justify. I was just really a bad choice of words there.
You just broke the entire studio with that one right now.
Yeah.
It's so innocent, and then you were just like, oh no. That's
I guess I should own it and say pun intended. But they can't hide from it, right? They're going to be looking for a new quarterback. Jameis Winston is barely not being paid a lot. He's a free agent at the end of the year. If anything, if they re-sign him, it would be a bridge to a young quarterback. But I do think that this Berry and Stefanski will be, go back to answer your question and take my foot out of my mouth, I do think they will be in Cleveland next year, yes.
Yeah, I tend to agree. Like, so much of what you saw last year, I think, is what people that would argue for Kevin Stefanski's future would point to, right? Once Deshaun Watson went out last season and you went through this cavalcade of quarterbacks that ultimately ends with Joe Flacco taking you to the postseason, most people point to that, as we did last year when we gave him the award, and say, hey, that's coaching. That's being able to weather that storm.
Right.
But the decision-making is also a part of this, especially for Andrew Berry, the GM. And so I will be curious. I'm with you, though. I generally tend to think when you've got problems of this magnitude, you're probably going to keep this much intact, because there's the other thought of, hey, if you're getting ready to make wholesale changes like at quarterback, potentially draft a new one, do you want the same GM and brain trust who made the decision around Deshaun Watson to be back and ultimately making this decision again here? I think some of that might be the financials of the situation. We'll wait and see. As for the game of this one, Dad, as I mentioned, you're calling it tonight, so you're not going to pick it with us here. The Pittsburgh Steelers are 3.5-point road favorites in this game, and coming off of a performance that's the high watermark of their season, this team going and strapping down the number one offense in the NFL in the Baltimore Ravens, doing it on the backs of 6 field goals by Chris Boswell in this game. And so is there any way, Jameis Winston threw for 395 yards last week and can be a bit of a chaos agent. Is there anything you see in this game and worry about in a short week that could be trap game territory for the Steelers team?
Listen, I don't know if you're at the point of looking ahead. They play the Bengals next, which has a losing record but a great offense. Then they actually play the Browns again. They play the Browns twice in 3 games. And then it gets to Murderers Row, at Philadelphia, at Baltimore, home to the Chiefs. I don't think, because of Mike Tomlin, that they get caught looking ahead. Mike Tomlin is focused on this game. Again, it's a short week, so the nicks and bruises are magnified a bit, where guys may still be playing, but they may be inhibited a little bit. You get a good show with two great Defensive Player of the Year candidates in T.J. Watt and Myles Garrett. I can't see the Cleveland defense would have to step up. Now, again, this isn't a high-powered Pittsburgh offense, as shown by 6 field goals, and they couldn't get in the end zone. But they have shown at times a propensity to score. And I think based off of Taysom Hill and what he did last week for New Orleans against Cleveland, maybe you see a little more Justin Fields with some quarterback run packages, possibly, depending on what they saw in film. But I could see that happening. For Pittsburgh, one of the struggles and why they've had to kick field goals is teams will normally go to zone in the red zone, and Russ has struggled with zone. Man-to-man, he looks for George Pickens, right? And now Mike Williams. Yeah. But in zone, he struggled a little more. So and that's what defenses are going to go to, and that's what's kept them out of the end zone. So that, in the end of the day, could be their downfall. I don't really mean in this game. I mean going forward is the fact that of not being able to put the ball in the end zone enough. But I think because they're led by Mike Tomlin, that they should be fine. Now, they have gone through 5 offensive line combinations. They're the only team that has gone through at least 5 O-line combination and has a winning record. At one point in the year, they had 3 rookies, a first-year player, and a second-year player on the line. So they have really reshuffled it a bit. But tried and true, their running game is still strong, and their defense is still strong, the hallmark of a Pittsburgh Steelers team.
Yeah, he's still certainly going to have to protect that offensive line against Myles Garrett, who has still been sensational this year. Yeah. In pressuring the quarterback, getting close to home. And you mentioned seeing him and T.J. Watt on the field. What did you think about this? I was surprised at Myles Garrett, how candid he was. Now, maybe some of this is the frustration of the season leaking over, but after he won Defensive Player of the Year last year, T.J. Watt, who was not attending NFL honors, tweeted out nothing I'm not used to on social media, basically highlighting his thoughts on the loss here. Myles Garrett talked to reporters on Tuesday and was asked if he ever heard from T.J. Watt after that, and his direct quote was, "No, he didn't say nothing to me. He's got to apologize to me when I see him." I don't understand where this beef has come from here. I heard J.J. Watt talking about this on the Pat McAfee show yesterday, if there was any beef between these two guys here. I tend to think it's just high-level competitors, but maybe the season's getting to Myles Garrett a little bit, because that seemed like it was a bit of a promo that he cut.
Yeah, I don't know why T.J. Watt saying finishing second posted nothing I'm not used to warrants an apology. I don't. Yeah. I don't understand. And Myles Garrett said, "I never complained about the trophy not being at my house and vice versa. He shouldn't be feeling 2 ways about knowing it's going to me. So just going to play the game. I don't play against TJ and he doesn't play against me." And that's right. They don't play against each other. It's in the hands of voters. I don't think TJ Watt's comment was a stinging shot at Myles Garrett in any way, shape, or form. So I'm not really sure what the need for an apology is. I was scratching my head on that one.
I was too, but again, I think it's one of those things where, hey, this season's been a lot of not fun for everybody involved here, and so for Myles Garrett as well, this might be where he goes back to, whose sack total's down, by the way. He's down at 12th in terms of sacks over this season, but has also gone out here and recorded the 3rd most pressures this season, has the 3rd best pressure percentage this season, and Next Gen Stats tracks quick pressures if you get to the quarterback or near him in under 2.5 seconds, and Myles Garrett has the most quick pressures in the NFL this season. So still incredibly potent, just not getting quarterbacks down dead in the same way.
So talking about stats here and the quick pressures and such, this is the one stat that I'm taking into the game that I love. Since 2016, Russell Wilson has thrown 233 moon balls. You know how he loves to throw the ball up. And a moon ball, there's a definition for a moon ball. It's
we have a definition for moon balls.
Yes. 233 moon balls. A moon ball is a ball in the air for 2.5 seconds or more. So, like we're talking about getting to the quarterback in under 2.5 seconds is a quick pressure, the ball in the air for 2.5 seconds or more is a moon ball. He has thrown 67 more moon balls than the closest quarterback, who was Derek Carr. And of those 233 moon balls, he has 60 completions and 22 touchdowns. So that, to me, you just go through stats as you're preparing for a game and watch film and how players are playing and mix the stats in the play. This one just kind of jumped off the page to me. I'm like, what the hell's a moon ball? But you think about it, and that's what Russ does. Russ throws the best deep ball in the game. And it is true, because he gets so much air under it, it drops right in the bucket. And it makes it a lot tougher for a defender to defend.
I want to know from the nerds involved, and I say nerd lovingly here as someone that skews nerdy myself, I want to know if Russell Wilson was the one that actually prompted them to go and look and classify a moonball because he's thrown it so much more than everybody else. Is this something that he gets credit for, this stat now being in the books? Because I love it. I love a distinction like this that allows us to get to a stat like this for this game. And it's true. And it's one of those things that sometimes stats are hard for people to see. We have all these baseball stats that are difficult at times for people to actually see with their eyes when they go to a game. This one's easy. Russ throws the ball really high and really far. We've known this his entire career, and now we actually have numbers to back that up. And in this case, Dad, I thought Russ doing that last week would be the key for the Steelers if they were to beat the Baltimore Ravens. And instead, it really does seem to be, though, that'll be a pitch that they've got in their arsenal. But for the Steelers, it does seem to be about the holistic approach to everything. The defense is the most dominant unit on this team. They're going to have to continue to do that. And I do think for Jameis Winston, who's been airing it out all season long and who attacks the intermediate and the deep range of the field, that's where the Steelers are best. Passes over 10 yards. This is one of the better groups, I think second best in the NFL in defending passes in that range, if not right around that spot. So I think the Browns are going to have a really bad time against this defense, even on a short week. And like you said, Mike Tomlin's going to have them all prepped. But how about some love for the dog, Danny Smith? Danny Smith, who's probably the most oft-named special teams coordinator in the NFL now. When you look at these two teams on paper, shout out to the folks, Aaron Schatz, our buddy, and the guys over at FTN. They do their DVOA metric for efficiency in football. And they rank special teams. The Pittsburgh Steelers, Dad, the second-ranked special teams unit in the NFL, according to DVOA. The Cleveland Browns are 29th, and that's coming off a week with some missed field goals, like a lot of the other rest of the NFC North outside of Pittsburgh, but certainly also in all the other areas that we know Danny Smith's going to have this team ready. That's the problem with the Steelers, is you've got to prepare for every phase in a way most teams just aren't capable of. So I know you can't pick this game. I like the Steelers. I think they get it done by over the 3.5. Which is incredible to say given the fact that the over-under for this game is like an Iowa football college-esque 37 points.
Which is interesting, because in the winning streak for Pittsburgh, going back to the Raiders where it started, the 5-game winning streak, they scored 32, 37, 26, 28, and 18. They've actually scored some points. So that you're right. It is like an Iowa game, and you're right. I can't pick the game. I'm looking forward to a good old-fashioned AFC North hard-hitting ball game.
And I think that's why the point total went down. Mike Tomlin got asked what he thought about going and winning a football game where he didn't score a touchdown, and he just said, that's the AFC North, baby. So we'll see what Al Michaels gets from the AFC North tonight. Coming up next, we'll head to the Hall of Fame on GoJo and Golic.
Welcome back to GoJo and Golic. The 25 semifinalists for the Pro Football Hall of Fame have been announced. Let's take a look and discuss the candidates here, guys. So first-year guys, we got some returning legends, and we need to break this all down. And luckily, we have you two, some tried-and-true football guys here to help us with this. So let's get your first ballot guys from this year's pool who are jumping out to you.
Yeah, and that becomes a fascinating discussion, Jesse, with that versus who will actually make it on the first ballot for this class, because this is really a class that's about one guy in terms of the debate, and that's Eli Manning, Dad. And the question of if he would be a guy on your first ballot from this group when we're looking at the cases presented to us. Eli Manning, who obviously has the name, the fame, and the 2 Super Bowl victories over the New England Patriots that are going to be the primary driver of this discussion. Did he make your list? Is he a first ballot guy in your mind when you look at this Hall of Fame class?
Eli is not a first ballot Hall of Famer in my eyes. I have 3. I think 2 locks and possibly 3 from the first timers. I think Luke Kuechly should be a lock. 5-time first team All-Pro, 2-time second team, 7-time Pro Bowler, Defensive Player of the Year, Rookie Defensive Player of the Year. I mean, he's led the league in tackles a few times. I think he should be a lock. And I think Terrell Suggs is 8th all time on the sack list, and the 7 guys ahead of him are all in the Hall of Fame, and guys behind him are in the Hall of Fame. So I think Suggs should be a first ballot, and a quiet and he wasn't the outspoken one of the group, but the Legion of Boom. I think Earl Thomas really deserves a look at being a first teamer. I like Marshall Yanda, but there's kind of a line waiting. There's Will Anderson, there's Jari Evans, who were finalists last year. So that's the one thing you wonder who else is in the position group that's kind of in the queue waiting to be selected. But I think Kuechly and Suggs are locks for first ballot Hall of Fames. I would put Earl Thomas in there. Marshall Yanda, I think, should go as well, but I think he might get caught in the line. But to go back to answer your question and your thought, I do not have Eli Manning as a first ballot. Do you?
I do not know. I think, and for everyone wondering, every year in the Hall of Fame, you get 3 to 5 candidates from the modern list that these guys are a part of. And so looking at it with that scarcity in mind, I don't. I think Eli Manning's going to get in eventually, and I think that'll be deservedly so. It's the, line.
Yeah.
Can you tell the story of pro football without them? And the answer with the Mannings in general is no, but Eli's got a hand in that. He thwarted one of the best seasons in modern NFL history in the 07 Patriots season and toppled them in another one. He was the dynasty killer amongst that time. He was the only one that seemed to have the antidote in the big stage for Tom Brady in that group. He was a part of some big winning postseason moments, but you look at the rest of the time that he was with them, and I don't know, a lot of it just does not pass the smell test with him. For the Giants, after they won their last Super Bowl, they had just 2 winning seasons with Eli Manning from 2012 to 2018. Didn't win a playoff game in that time. He led the league in interceptions 3 times in his career and finished with a career passer rating of 84.1, 60.3% career completion percentage. So a lot of what we remember from him from the regular seasons and the rest of his career outside of those 2 playoff runs, Dad, to me invites a little more doubt. He's like basically 11th on every meaningful volume stat list for quarterbacks in the NFL. So again, I'm not saying he's not a Hall of Famer. I'm just saying when you look at the group of guys in the first team, he would not be one for me. I'm with you. I'd have Kuechly and Suggs in there on this list, getting in with the first team guys. I think those are the ones that I can say definitively when I look at them. Both former defensive players of the year. I understand the shorter career is the knock on Luke Kuechly, but I think for everyone who got to see him play, I was fortunate enough to play against him in college, whether it's statistically, whether it's the awards, defensive rookie of the year in addition to defensive player of the year and all the things down on that list, that guy has solidified himself as one of the best linebackers of the 21st century, and I think absolutely deserving of that first ballot choice.
Oh, I think without a doubt. Like I said, I think he and how can Suggs not be a lock? Again, 7th all time on the sack list. I just would have to believe. And then as far as returning finalists, I mean, Antonio Gates, I think it's a matter of time before he gets in. You have the wide receivers.
I think he's got to get in this year. Like, I look at those guys and that triumvirate of him and Phillip Rivers and LT in that group for the Chargers, was just an incredible part of my childhood to begin with. But Antonio Gates, as one of the guys along with Tony Gonzalez, that's his poster for the basketball to football switch. He owns the record for the most tight ends by a touchdown in league history. So that's a guy that should be in now on this second try for him.
Yep. I would agree. Torrey Holt, Reggie Wayne, 2 wide receivers waiting in line. I mentioned the O-linemen. D-backs, I'm obviously partial to Eric Allen, my teammate in Philly, who was a returning finalist. But there's also Darren Woodson and Rodney Harrison in that DB group as well. So, again, you get kind of, I think all 3 eventually do get in, but is there a line of who goes first, who goes second, who goes third? Do 2 of them get in one group? That I don't know. And it's the one thing about the Hall of Fame that's kind of weird. In my thing, you're either a Hall of Famer or you're not, but you obviously wait. It's like rooms in the Hall of Fame. I think there are separate rooms in the Hall of Fame. So I can see this guy is a surefire first, like we talk about, guys that are playing now, like Zach Martin. Zach Martin, 5 years when he's done playing, walks into the Hall of Fame. There are a number of players in the league that are in that position. And I do think you do differentiate between them and others who are in a different room in the Hall of Fame.
I would agree. I do think a lot of this is just the nuts and bolts of, and you want to make it special for everybody involved, but if we didn't have to do speeches and major presentations for everyone, you could probably let a lot more guys in every year than you do and just make this an easier process. But we're already there for hours on end listening to everybody else go up there and get to tell their story. And it's awesome. It's one of our favorite parts every year of the Hall of Fame induction, Dad.
And you have a kicker in Adam Vinatieri. Again,
so that's the one I wanted to ask you about. Yeah,
the specialists get screwed, and this amazes me. It is, and I know we talk about offense, defense, special team, 1/3, 1/3, 1/3, and it is, but it's not treated that way. And there's only 2 kickers in the Hall of Fame, a punter. I mean, and then actual special team player, a returner in Devin Hester. But I look at a guy like Steve Tasker, who came in my draft with the Houston Oilers, and just what a special teams player he was, playing all the special teams, doing all the dirty work, and one of the best to do it for a long period of time. I don't think it's easier to look at kickers and punters and returners because there's stats involved, and I still think they get screwed in the long run for the lack of special teams players that are in the Hall of Fame. But then, like the meat and bones special team players, the one where there's really no stats involved, who like a Steve Tasker, and there are certainly others out there as well. I think those guys get the short end of the stick.
Well, that's like Matthew Slater, who just finished up with the Patriots, who should absolutely be a Hall of Famer for his work on special teams. It's much the same way. And I don't know. I hope we can get to that point where we do stop just paying lip service to that. As critical as I am of specialists, and I still think they have it way too easy at practice. I'm sick of seeing them play golf during training camp, on and on down the list, all those things. And right now, we're not coming off a banner weekend for specialists in the NFL outside of Chris Boswell. It really was everybody else going out and reminding them why people mutter terrible things under their breath about kickers in practice. But a guy like Adam Vinatieri, this should be a no-brainer. Adam Vinatieri, one of the most clutch kickers, one of the most clutch players in NFL history. I mean, you hear that name and the NFL Films music starts playing behind you and snow starts to fall in whatever room that you're in. Like, I don't know, Dad. To me, this shouldn't be hard. I understand that, again, the impact on the game overall is comparatively less than a lot of these other guys that we're talking about here. But in high leverage moments, to be someone, a kicker who's a household name, and that's like guys like him, Justin Tucker, Lock Hall of Famer, despite some of the recent struggles, that shouldn't be a difficult conversation, even if we know less of them are going to get in overall.
So again, as far as kickers in the Hall of Fame, we have Morton Anderson, kicker. He's a class of 2017. His years with the Saints. You have Jan Stenerud, class of 1991, great kicker with the Chiefs. Then you have guys who were kickers / something else. George Blanda, who was a quarterback as well. Lou Groza, who was in the class of 74. And then only one punter, Ray Guy. Ray Guy's the only punter in the Hall of Fame. And again, that's a position that should change. The position of punting has changed over the years to now nose down, back spinning Australian type punting instead of my former teammate Jeff Fields coffin corner kicking, the way that used to be the big thing in the NFL.
I was just going to say, if we are going to change the conversation about punters, my one caveat would be we need to make the NFL's punting wing of the Hall of Fame the satellite office in Australia. We need these guys to be able to visit it when they're back home with their families, because so many of them from this point on, like if we're going to project out into the future in a world where punters are finally recognized for their contributions to the NFL, while I understand Pat McAfee is the patron saint of that group and would certainly champion this to be in Indianapolis, I would have to say, based on volume, if we are going to cater to the audience of punters most likely to be occupying these spaces in Canton, they're all coming from Pro Kick Australia. And so I feel like we should just take that wing of the Hall of Fame and put it in Australia so that these guys can go out there and hang out with their families and take their 3 kids that they have when they're 29 in college and show them their wares over in the Hall of Fame.
Yeah, unfortunately, I don't think there's going to be a run on punters in the NFL in the Pro Football Hall of Fame.
Hey.
I think that's still a ways away. I think you have better shot with kickers like Adam Vinatieri and returners. But before punters. But I do think specialists get the short end of the stick with these voters for sure.
Yeah, Adam Vinatieri, the NFL's career leader in points with 2,673, made field goals with 599 over 24 years with the Patriots and the Colts. He also leads all players with 56 field goals and 238 points in the postseason, which obviously, part and parcel of being on the wagon for the Tom Brady-led Patriots for all those years, but you still got to deliver in a lot of those moments, and he certainly did. So hopefully those guys all get a chance, Dad, because, again, this is one of those things I think it becomes emotional for so many fans when it's the players from your era. And that's where we firmly arrive now for me, is the players that were the heroes of my childhood are now the ones whose careers are on trial for the Hall of Fame. And Adam Vinatieri is one of those guys that, to me, for my football lifetime, is a no-brainer. Like, you say the name, you snap your fingers, and Hall of Fame is the word that comes out of your mouth.
Yeah, and to these players, it's a prideful thing as well. Just like it's a prideful thing playing in the NFL, making it the NFL, trying to be one of the better players in the NFL. And then there's different stages. I will, for the rest of my life, have to pay to get into the Pro Football Hall of Fame, while there are players who will get a gold jacket and have a bust and be memorialized in the Hall of Fame. And they do care where they going first ballot.
Sure.
That's a high honor to go first ballot. You've had some, Harry Carson's the one who played in my era. It took him so long to get in. Remember, he had said, if it's been so long, even if I get voted in, I'm not going in. And of course he changed his mind, because once you get voted into the Hall of Fame, you're in the Hall of Fame. But it's a prideful thing to have to wait year after year after year, or maybe go to the Veterans Committee. Still an honor once you get there, but these guys are full of pride, and they want to be that first ballot, if not first ballot, second ballot or third ballot, before it gets to be monotonous for them. But at the end of the day, if you end up with a gold jacket, you end up with a gold jacket.
Yeah, I can say the guys I feel bad for are the ones that go in posthumously, where it's like, all right, like, what does it matter to me now? I'm dead. Like, this, might be great for your family to get to celebrate, but you could have thrown me the bone and just done this while I was still breathing would have been nice. But no, I'm with you. I appreciate the competitive nature, and you made me think of something. And I would love to know this. We need to talk to a Hall of Famer right now. You know more of them than I do at this point. If you're a Hall of Famer, you don't have to pay to go to the Hall of Fame with your family later on, right? Like, if you show up in Canton and you want to go and look at the Hall of Fame, you just show them the ring and they let you in, I'd imagine, right?
Yeah, it would be stunning if not. You should get some kind of card that gives you full access at all times. You say, my bust is in there. I paid with my blood, sweat, and tears of hundreds of games to be in here. I am not paying the money to get in here.
No, I saw Bryant Young back in South Bend for the Florida State game that weekend. Let me tell you what, you don't even need to show them any paperwork. The ring stands out on itself and should grant you access readily anytime you're there.
Welcome back to GoJo and Golic. Jesse Cofield, Mike Golic Jr. and Mike Golic Sr. here with you. Guys, are we witnessing a sort of renaissance at the running back position? I mean, the position rife with disrespect over the last couple years. We saw that in some of the valuations, trades, stuff like that. So let's talk about the guys this year who are putting some respect on the running back name. GoJo, we got like Derrick Henry, Saquon, obviously a name that jumps out to us. What do we think about these guys who are saying not so fast when it comes to the running back position?
Yeah, I think, first off, individually looking at these guys, we recognize they're some of the most talented players at the position. And Saquon Barkley and Josh Jacobs, a little more in the meat of the bell curve of prime years age-wise for these guys. Derrick Henry, you were talking about another guy, future Hall of Famer. What he's doing at this age, continuing to, especially with the carry load that he's already got on his body, Dad, is second to none. And he lands in an offense that was already one of the best rushing offenses in the NFL last year, statistically the best rushing offense in the NFL. But he's even brought an added layer of a finisher and a hammer in the fourth quarter that this team lacked. And so I think first and foremost, is there one in that group that you've been most impressed with, Dad? I mean, Saquon Barkley, I think just for so many of us, because his time in New York, there was never the offensive line around him that really could go and create holes the way that we wanted to see for him. Injury was also a part of that story. So I feel like it's been the most enjoyable to watch him, style of play-wise, because we got stuff like the reverse hurdle, but also because it's in contrast to where he was versus Derrick Henry, a guy who's won rushing titles in Tennessee.
Yeah, he has, and he went to the best rushing team in the game that lost, Dobbins and Edwards, both to the Chargers, by the way. So he went on a team that was already a great rushing team and had a lot to do with the quarterback in Lamar Jackson, just like Saquon Barkley and Jalen Hurts, can run as well. I still look to Derrick because he's at that magic age when you're supposed to start tailing off. Saquon feels like he's been in the league longer than his 27 years. He's 27 years old. I thought he was older than that, but he's not. Josh Jacobs, who's third in the league, is rushing is 26. Chuba Hubbard, fourth in the league, is 25. So you're kind of seeing guys that are hitting their stride up near the top. But to me, Derrick Henry, both Derrick and Saquon, but Derrick because he's 30 and he's still doing it, getting in the end zone. He's a fourth quarter hammer. May not gain all the yards early, but in the fourth quarter, he puts the finishing touch on a team. Just listen, he's a spectacle. His pure size, his ability to run over people, his ability to stiff arm is just, while Saquon's ability to jump over people, it's just incredible to watch. And you're also seeing a position that we had talked about as unbelievably undervalued. I keep saying it. Their cap number is only better than kickers and punters. It's the worst of the normal field positions of the NFL. I think the tight ends is second. So what you're seeing is a running attack by teams now because defenses are playing back, right? Because of the passing attack, it's the natural kind of repositioning. Passing was uptime big in the NFL, so defenses start playing more cover two. They stop dropping safeties back. They start trying to take the longer pass away. That's why every game I call, it's a short pass, it's a screen, it's a hitch, it's a slant, it's a get the ball out of your hands type of an offense. Let the receiver or running back swinging out do their damage after the catch, because defenses are playing back. But what else opens up? The running attack opens up. So you're trying to force the defense to play up with the rushing attack, and then you hit them with play action. Like tonight, Pittsburgh is a high play action team because they run the ball well. So you try and freeze the linebackers with play action to try and throw it over the top. But that's one of the reasons we're seeing these running backs, I think, run well, is the defenses have been playing back, and you're like, it's basically you take what the defense is giving you. You play back, it's a short pass. You play back, it's a running attack until you play up, and then you try and go over the top. But I would still say Derrick, going back to your original question, Derrick, because of his age and his just freakish ability to stay healthy and just still pulverize people.
So it is interesting because I think a lot of what people wonder now is, Are we going to see more of this? Could we see other good running backs stuck in bad situations pulled out of there and given an opportunity the way that these guys were this last season? Because when you look at where all of these guys were last year, Josh Jacobs last year played in 13 games, had 805 yards on the Raiders team that was 30th in rush yards per game. Derrick Henry played 17 games, had over 1,100 yards for a Titans team that was 17th in rush yards per game. Saquon Barkley, 14 games, 962 yards, and the 16th ranked team in terms of rush yards per game. And so all of those teams not capable of making use of these talents the way their current outfits were. Philly last year was 7th in yards before contact by the usually an offensive line stat. Green Bay 11th, Baltimore 4th. They all went to better situations that were able to say, hey, we'll spend a little bit more on the running back. We'll give them the long-term security because we believe we've got the team better suited to do that in a league where, Dad, to your point, the league average in rushing yards per game right now is up over 120 yards per game. It's 120.4. The last time it was over 120 in a season was 2022. Do you know when the last time it was before that? When the NFL rushing average, league-wise, was over 120 yards per game?
No.
1988.
Oh, okay, my era.
Yeah, I mean, we had to go. I thought we'd get to the early 2000s. I thought we'd get to the late 90s. But according to Pro Football Reference, the last time season-wide before 2022 that the NFL averaged 120 rush yards per game across the board was 1988. They also averaged in 24 and 22 over 4.4 yards per carry. Before 2018, the league had never been over 4.3 yards per carry. So they're doing it with even fewer touches, but being incredibly effective. And so, Dad, I thought about taking a look and seeing if there is a running back that qualifies for what could go on here next year. And the one that jumped off the page immediately to me in terms of a guy that could be in an interesting spot next year, because I went and looked at who are going to be some of the free agents coming up next season. And one of them is pretty interesting. Now, James Conner, I think, is set to be a free agent according to Spot Track, but I doubt Arizona is going to let him go, even though he's 29 years old. Aaron Jones with Minnesota is in that. Najee Harris actually is coming up on the end of his rookie deal in Pittsburgh as well. But for some of these cases, I feel like the teams that understand and appreciate the identity they bring to them, the timing of their good years, might be back with that group. The one that's in an interesting spot right now, especially because of injury, is Nick Chubb. And we've watched the atrophy of this Cleveland Browns offensive line over the last couple of seasons where injury has taken hold, and this year's another year like that. And so I do wonder if, hey, Nick Chubb is 28 years old, going on 29 years old right now. He's dealt with some lower body injuries here, but if you get him behind or in one of these situations where you've got a better offensive line, could he be a guy that pops a little bit more than you would expect in the 2025 season?
Nick Chubb is third all-time in yards per carry at 5.18 yards per carry. Third all time. Second is Jim Brown. He can get it done. And I agree with you on where, because I was doing the same thing looking at running back. I'm looking at the top 10 and the guys you mentioned, Henry, Barkley, and Jacobs. You mentioned what they ran for last year. Barkley and Jacobs are already at those amounts.
Yeah.
And in 10 and 11 games. And Barkley is 200 yards ahead of where he was last year. I mean, it is amazing. And you look at the top 10 rushers, they're on playoff teams. Gibbs from Detroit, Bijan Robinson, Joe Mixon, except for 4 and 7. Chuba Hubbard, who just signed a 4-year deal with the Panthers, and you hope they hang on to him, right? He's 4th in the league in rushing. And, they traded away CMC, but again, it was a 4-year, $33 million deal. The cap hit is not that bad for you not to hang on to him. And the other is a guy who's been around for a while in Alvin Kamara. Alvin Kamara is 29 years old. It feels like he's been around for longer than that, but he's the 7th leading rusher in the league. So there's only really 2 that are really in non-playoff situations. But Nick Chubb is a great point on what direction Cleveland is going to go, of how much they're going to revamp their team coming up. Every team changes, whether you're the Super Bowl winning team or the worst team in the league. Every team changes some. Obviously, some team change more than others, and that will be an interesting microscope on the Browns of how they change at the end of the year.
I mentioned yards before contact per carry seems to me like the closest thing we have to an offensive line stat. How many yards on average before you get touched by the defense is usually an indication of, does your team have a running quarterback? Which is the other part of this, by the way, Dad, that we didn't mention, is these guys going to situations like Philadelphia where you've got Jalen Hurts that can threaten the edge. Obviously, Lamar Jackson in Baltimore and what he's been able to do there. Less so for Josh Jacobs, although there's been the times where you've had Malik in the quarterback spot there filling in for Jordan Love, who's been injured. And Jordan Love can move, but he's not really the same caliber of mobile quarterback. But there's no doubt that's also led to this advent of rushing being used as an advantage when you've got quarterbacks like Josh Allen that are also a viable rush threat in whatever your ground attack is going to be. So that's all interesting there. But yards before contact, Dad, you know who is top 10? And you mentioned Chuba Hubbard there. The Carolina Panthers, 9th in the NFL in yards before contact per rush. This team that we have left for dead for a while, who's been awful this year, to be clear. The defense is bad. They need so many help in so many places. But I was surprised, and with some of the production we've seen from Chuba Hubbard there, you start to look and go, all right, there's a little bit of a bright spot here that they might be able to capitalize on. There's the other side of this, though, Dad, that I think you'll appreciate as a former defensive tackle is I do think this is going to increase, and we've seen over the recent years, it only increases the value of quality defensive tackles that are coming out in the NFL draft. And I look at, the guys that you've got coming out of Michigan here, and Mason Graham, and I'm forgetting the other defensive tackle's name for them right now, and scrolling furiously on this mock draft to try and find it. But either way, you've got two guys, I think Kenneth Graham, that you've got two guys coming out of there, guys every year that are going to be, I would hope, pushed up draft boards, because that position in particular in this version of the NFL, where I don't know when defensive coordinators are eventually going to break and say, all right, we've been trying to take away the big play for so long. We get these quarterbacks are talented, but my God, we're getting bludgeoned by the best teams in the NFL up front, and make that switch. And so in the meantime, if you are a high quality interior defensive lineman, if you are, God forbid, we get a thumper at linebacker again, I'd imagine your value is going to go through the roof.
And then you talk about value. Is this resurgence of the running back position and the stats you just gave, is it going to improve their pay? Is it going to be, because remember, the running backs had their call amongst themselves through the kind of a bitch session, about we're not being paid, which solved nothing because they're still not being paid. I mean, think, all the running backs. Joe Mixon signed a 3-year, $27 million deal, $9 million a year. Josh Jacobs, 4 for 48. Nice deal, 12 a year. Saquon Barkley, 3 for 37, 12 a year. Derrick Henry, the one that Jerry Jones said they couldn't afford, 2 years, $16 million. I mean, the numbers by comparison are so low when you see all these other position players, the better players at the position, sign deals. It blows these out of the water. So I do wonder, is this going to improve the value? And we'll find out with the next group of running backs that are on the open market of what they can possibly get.
My general thought and my knee-jerk reaction is no, because there's still bad math on their side here. There are still, I always go back to this. It is the most, on offense at least, the most accessible position body type-wise on the field. You can have guys that are all different sizes, shapes, and speeds that can be effective there, and because there's so many of them, you can get them at later portions in the draft. We've talked about all of that, and we've seen backfields bundle these guys and do a really good job. And the other part is, the teams that we mentioned had good infrastructure in place. Not everybody is capable of doing what these guys have gone out and done, and so I think that supply and demand issue is going to make it interesting for the time being, especially because these guys tend to age a little more presidentially because of the wear and tear, because of that physical nature of their position. I hope I'm wrong, and I hope we're seeing the pendulum swing back the other way, where we start to pay these guys a little more regularly in cases like this where it's so obvious, hey, these are great players hamstrung by bad situations where things can get a lot better in a hurry. Speaking of getting better in a hurry, coming up in the next hour, our buddy Jason Fitz is going to join us to take a look at the upcoming quarterback class heading into the NFL draft. Next on GoJo Golic. that's coming up in the next hour here. But in the meantime, it's time to get some bets out for Thursday night. It's time for Better Yet, presented by our friends at Larceny Weeded Bourbon. Lock in a win and seize tonight. Bardstown, Kentucky, 46% alcohol by volume. Think wisely, drink wisely. The Pittsburgh Steelers on the road in the Cleveland Browns. And again, Cleveland's got a good history of winning on Thursday nights, but that being said, the Steelers team humming on all cylinders right now. 3.5-point favorites with the over-under, we mentioned before, down at 37 right now. While this feels very 2023, 2022 Iowa-esque, I think it's a little bit of an overcorrection to that Ravens-Steelers game from last week. I like the Steelers winning by over 3.5, and I'll probably take the over on this one as well, points-wise. We'll take a look at the NFL and Deion Sanders next on GoJo and Golic. All right, hour number 2 of GoJo and Golic here. We got plenty to get to. I am actually fascinated by what's going on right now. Caitlin Clark made the announcement that she will not be playing in the new startup 3-on-3 league Unrivaled that begins in January, that has been put together by Brianna Stewart and Nafisa Collier in conjunction with some corporate partners here. It's going to take place in a facility down in Miami that's got an interesting story to it. John Skipper, who works over with Meadowlark Media, our old boss at ESPN, is an investor, and there was a great Pablo Torre Finds Out episode diving into some of the details of this. But that was during the recruitment phase for Caitlin Clark, who we know is integrally important to this. So I'm fascinated to get into that and some NFL and some college football with our buddy Jason Fitz, who joins us now. You can check him out over at Yahoo Sports Inside Coverage, Yahoo Sports College Football Power Hour host here. But also just the weirdest guy, and south of Dan Orlovsky, and really our own Jesse Cofield after her Oreo take yesterday, which was just heinous.
Yeah,
Jason might have some of the worst food takes on planet Earth. And we're sitting here talking about breakfast, and Jason's on this health journey right now, and he's over here housing egg whites because he wants to be a big, strong boy when he grows up. And we were talking about dressing up your breakfast, and I love hot sauce on things in the morning here. Everyone's got the stuff here. Jason chimes in, yeah, I throw deli mustard on mine. Who hurt you, dude? What's wrong with you?
Well, my mom. But here's the biggest thing. Like, I mean, over time, you got to look like egg whites don't have a lot of flavor, right? So there's not a lot to egg whites. So, and I love yellow mustard. So for the longest time, I just smothered them in yellow mustard. And then one day I tried deli mustard, a little spicy brown mustard on some egg whites. So like I eat 200 grams of egg whites with a whole egg on top of it. I keep that egg over easy, so I get a little bit of the yolk going over it. And then I just smother and cover that thing in deli mustard and then house it. It tastes great. It's like a little egg sandwich.
I have never heard of deli. And you're right. Egg whites, kind of like grits, have their taste is what you mix them with. And I'm like Mike, I'm a big hot sauce guy, but I love mustard. I'm not going to lie. When you first said it, I was disgusted, but I'm a mustard guy and I might try it. I might try it.
Look,
I'm not sure I'm going to like it.
You're going to love it.
Yeah. I don't know.
So
I don't know.
I would say this. I've heard weirder. Now, most of this is born out of, again, Jason's in the middle of a health journey. A lot of my food proclivities came when I was trying to gain weight and play football. And I had a buddy of mine who would make eggs and who would coat them, I'm not joking, every morning would cover them in peanut butter on top of his eggs.
That sounds weird. And look, I got to be careful with peanut butter because there's a lot of sugar in peanut butter. Also, everybody puts ketchup on eggs. I'm not putting, like, if I'm going to take extra sugar in, it's not going to be from ketchup. Like, that's not where I'm going to waste calories during the course of the day in this journey that I'm on.
I love ketchup.
Mustard doesn't have any of that. Like, I don't have to worry about any of that stuff in mustard. Like, I'm telling you, it's foolproof. Like, if I want peanut butter, like I used to eat peanut butter by the spoon, like just out of the jar all day. So I love peanut butter. Peanut butter and egg white sounds gross though.
You can get peanut butter with no sugar added in it, right? That's a thing.
Yeah, that's what I eat. 14 grams of peanut butter, no sugar added, goes into my cream of rice twice a day.
I don't. I like when I'm going to occasionally splurge and eat ice cream. I'm not going to eat sugar-free ice cream. So when I occasionally splurge and have a peanut butter and jelly sandwich, I'm going to have real peanut butter. The fats are good in real peanut butter. I know I'm getting some of the sugar, but I'm not going to shortchange my occasional love of peanut butter by having sugar-free peanut butter, Jesse, as you hold your head in your hands. What?
Senior, this is what's wrong with America. The sugar-free peanut butter is the real peanut butter. The one you're eating with the sugar added to it is the fake peanut butter.
Maybe what's wrong with America is that we eat too much of the peanut. Like, have the peanut butter the way God intended with the sugar added, Jesse. Like,
God did not intend for us to add sugar to peanut butter.
I think God probably thought we should deserve a little treat.
You guys are sick. You're sick in the head.
By the way,
I can't fix you. I wish I could quit you. I can't. This is sick.
I will say, Jesse, I don't know what your Oreo take was, but Oreos in general are just one of the most overrated things in the entire world, and the cookie themselves are just useless. Like that. I've told Mike this for years. The only way I eat an Oreo is if I separate them and I take the cream out, because the cream's good in an Oreo. I'm not going to lie about that. I'll take the cream out. I'll stack all the creams. I will throw the cookie portion away because who needs it? It's a bad cookie. Like, it's objectively, that's just a bad cookie. And then I will eat the frosting.
And you throw away the cookie part, which is it's a fat, but the cream is perfectly healthy. I mean, are you serious?
The cream's tasty. If I'm gonna this is fat meat. Like, I haven't had an Oreo in so long. But fat meat certainly. Like, no, you scrape out the middle, you eat the middle. Like, if they gave me a trough of just the Oreo cream, I would probably eat that with the spoon. But if you involve the cookie portion of the Oreo, now you've made it into a garbage product.
That was my take. Was basically they don't taste good. Like, sorry, they just don't taste good.
I don't even know what to say. And we were talking about this, Jason, because Subway, the foot-long chocolate chip cookie they had is now a foot-long Oreo cookie. And it's the greatest thing known to mankind. The greatest thing known to mankind.
The foot-long cookie from Subway was actually like, when I was at the Super Bowl, Josh Allen brought one by, had a bite of that. I was like, yeah, this is good. Like, the foot-long cookie really surprised me. It was good. A foot-long Oreo? No, now we downgraded a product that didn't need to be tweaked.
Oh my God. Mike, I don't know how we have these two as friends.
Sorry, because
I am
contractually you're
praying
obligated.
for the sweet release of death right now to get me away from your guys' milk toast tasting food. Sweet Jesus. This really is. This is one of those situations where I encourage people to look around at their allies. And when you're looking around and authoring takes that only Dan Orlovsky would co-sign, you probably wound up on the wrong side of history. So I would just caution both of you on that front. I would ask at GoJo and Golic on Twitter, what is the weirdest topping you put on any food? In honor of this conversation, I need to know what your weird kink is when it comes to something you put on your food that others might find offensive here. And I am going to save my sanity and my father's sanity from hearing any more of this nonsense by asking Jason Fitz about something comparatively much less toxic, the college football playoff rankings. Fitz, this week has been hell online in the sport that we both love, in talking about how we pick a champion, the value of conference championships in the sport right now. Have you been surprised that we have gotten to this new iteration of best versus most deserving as rapidly as we did with the 12-team playoff?
Honestly, no, Mike. And look, yes, if you'd asked me a month ago, but when we saw the rankings, not this last week, but the week before, and everything already started with, well, Georgia wouldn't actually make the playoff. I did a video for Yahoo Sports where I said, hey, the system's already broken. We didn't anticipate the problems here. The system's already broken. And most of the comments on that video that ended up going viral on TikTok and all these things, everybody telling me I'm a moron and I'm worried about things that don't matter. What do you know?
You are.
This week, that's fair. Only one team is actually seeded and ranked in the same spot, and that's the number one team in the country. After that, it's pure bedlam, and nobody is actually ranked where they are seated. And the answer that so many people online want to give is, well, just win your games, and this isn't a problem. To which I say, the College Football Playoff Committee knows, for example, that Tennessee lost. And the College Football Playoff Committee still believes that Tennessee is a top 12 team. But we are not in this current iteration. If it were happening today, Tennessee would not make the playoffs. And the dangerous thing down the road that I think we need to really acknowledge is there's a possibility Boise State loses to Colorado State for the Mountain West Championship. There's a possibility that Army loses big to Notre Dame. They're not even ranked. There's a possibility that the highest ranked group of 5 champion, other conference champion that's not one of the Power 4, isn't even ranked. That might happen this year. And if that happens in year 1, and all of a sudden we're putting an unranked team in the college football playoff simply because they won a conference, that's a broken system. How do we not anticipate these problems from day one?
Oh, because anticipation is not the greatest foresight in college football. Do you think Lane Kiffin and the SEC are complaining about maybe not wanting to be in a conference championship game because they're 7, 9, 10, and 11 in the rankings, and not like the Big Ten, which is 1, 2, 4, and 5?
100%. You're right. Because the thing of it is, we're going to get into this really weird situation where somebody's going to lose a championship game, and that's going to be an extra L. And Mike, we talked about this for ages. How should championship games be considered? And it's an extra resume opportunity, and it is a factor. It's one data point. Well, if you go in and you get rolled in an SEC championship game, it's just one of those days. And we've seen every SEC team put up a game to forget, right? If your game to forget is the SEC championship game, you might miss the playoffs, while somebody that didn't play in that game at all, that doesn't take a third loss, sits there and makes it into the playoff. That seems like a really weird system to me. That makes me look at Penn State, even in the Big Ten. Penn State's the luckiest. They're looking around saying, good, everybody else, y'all figure out the Big Ten championship. We're going to sit right here. We're going to make the college football playoff. And the biggest resume that we have is a good loss. I don't know. It's interesting to be out of the conference championship.
Dude, you're
game.
preaching to the choir on this one. I have no idea how Indiana became the team drawing everyone's ire this week, and Penn State just got to skate on idly by as if nothing were wrong. They at least have a law. If you want to have this conversation about Indiana after the Ohio State game, if things get wild, be my guest. But I have a feeling the result of this game, one way or another, is going to alleviate a lot of the stress around the Indiana conversation for most people. Penn State is the one, if I'm an SEC fan, that I am enraged about because of the burden that they've had to not shoulder in getting into the top 5 week after week versus the burden for some of these back-end SEC teams. That being said, Jason, I am of the inclination that this has all been to put pressure on Ward Manuel and the members of the committee to reward teams at least, subconsciously for making the conference championship. To say that, hey, now in this 12-team playoff era where it's not just the binary of, all right, well, on your resume to make the playoffs with 4 teams, did you win your conference championship or not? And if you did, then great. We can award you for that depending on who you played and yada, yada. Now that we're talking about resumes that are more flawed from 8 through 12 in this and really 8 through 15, 16 in the rankings here, you've got to look at that and say, okay, maybe just making your conference championship in a world where there's no divisions and we're going by winning percentages and all this stuff needs to be also seen as an accomplishment worthy of being a resume boost regardless of what the result is there. And I have a feeling they're going to get their way. Like, again, to me, this is a moot point. If you're the Big 12 in the ACC, yeah, you got to be worried about if you're in the conference champion and get blowed out, not making the playoff. But those leagues kind of understand they're being pushed to the side already. The SEC and the Big 10 are not going to have the problem of their conference championships runner-up not making the playoff, I think, in our lifetime.
I don't know. You think if Tennessee takes a third, Tennessee's a bad example. Do you think if Ole Miss makes it to the SEC championship game and takes a third loss in this situation, that they're a lock for the college football playoff? So
yes.
You think they're a lock?
I don't.
I think the loser of the SEC championship. I think the loser of the SEC championship is not, especially in this year where it's such a garbled mess. Like in upcoming years, I think it's going to be easier. We got one of those weird years where a bunch of the good teams in the SEC all played each other and all did the, circle of parity thing where they ate the tail and ultimately got us to the transitive property being a mess in this. I think in most years it'll be easier, but no, I still think if they find their way into the SEC championship game and play that, unless it's 50-0, which I doubt is a possibility with Ole Miss's defense. Like, I think sometimes we deal disingenuously with scenarios that just aren't going to happen. I think that they're going to make it in. Yes, I think they're as close to a lock as you can get without understanding that this sport's crazy and anything can happen.
So who's going to be left out from the SEC if Texas A&M does what is thinkable and plausible and wins the SEC? Because Texas A&M isn't even part of this conversation right now. They're playing good football. They have they're flawed at the quarterback position. We know that, but they have every chance of winning the SEC, and they're not even in this thing right now.
Oh, buddy, if Texas loses to Texas A&M and gets to the doesn't get to the SEC championship or whatever, and Texas A&M makes it, if Texas A&M loses or beats Texas, I think Texas could be the one potentially on the outside looking in right now. Because when you start to look at their resume in the light next to these teams, you're probably going to have a bad time.
This is wild, y'all. And the other thing, Mike, I'll say quickly is we always talked about how certain scenarios were left for us, even if it's subconscious. I don't think it's an accident that Colorado, BYU are now both in similar proximity. I don't think it's an accident that SMU, Miami, they're making sure that whoever wins that conference championship game is still at least no, this wasn't a big leap. No, they're definitely a top 12 team. They're leaving the room for that.
Well, I wonder if at the end of all this, in the second year, next year of the rankings, if it's changed. That would be amazing if there's enough upheaval that something would be changed.
So I think it's locked in for this year and next year, but 2026 is when things can start to change. And we'll see. Everyone talks about the value of a conference championship and all that stuff. It seems like the SEC and the Big Ten would be content to blow that up in favor of getting more of their teams into the dance as we go forward. All right, welcome back to GoJo and Golic. Mike Golic Jr., Mike Golic Sr., Jesse Cofield, Jason Fitz hanging out with us for another segment here because we got so derailed talking about food toppings that we didn't get to a bunch of the football stuff we wanted to get to, including Jason. And I know we've talked with you about the upcoming quarterback class in the NFL draft a little bit, and we had sort of the perfect word cloud buzzword association with every first take headline from heaven in the last couple of days, where you had Deion Sanders to the Cowboys rumor starting, as former teammates of his like Michael Irvin were going and telling him that yes, he absolutely wants to coach in the NFL, even though Deion has said himself, no, the kickstand is down here in Colorado. I heard Joel Klatt the other day talking about how Deion wants to stay in college. He believes that's more of his vocation here. But as we're getting ready to watch his son Shedeur Sanders be one of the top quarterbacks in the upcoming NFL draft, Travis Hunter in that same vein as a Heisman hopeful right now, Fitz, are you giving any credence to the idea that whether it's Deion Sanders as a package deal with his son Shedeur, or Deion in general trying to influence outcomes for his son and for Travis Hunter, that that's something we need to prepare ourselves for in this upcoming draft cycle?
So I do not believe that there's any legs to the combination of Deion and Shedeur. And I'll take from this, Charles Robinson, our Yahoo Sports Insider on our show, Inside Coverage, talked a lot about talking to teams. And teams are already saying it's not the onboarding of the two of them together that would be complicated. It's the eventuality of an offboarding. Like if Shedeur doesn't work out, then you're going to his dad and saying, hey, you need to cut your kid. If Shedeur works out, but Deion doesn't, then you're going to your superstar quarterback and saying, hey, we're going to fire your dad. And that's a complication that, frankly, teams are aware of, even if they liked the tandem of it. Now, there is also, and frankly, again, I'll go to C-Rob and some other people I've talked to, there's also a very real concern for whoever drafts Shedeur, even if Deion isn't part of the package. Look at what we've seen this year with Caleb Williams' dad, with Rome Odunze's dad. Like, dads right now are not afraid to go to social media and say, this isn't going well. There is a concern inside, behind closed doors in the league already. There are concerns that if you draft Shedeur, you are going to have to deal with at every turn Deion in front of a microphone questioning whether or not his kid's being developed right, whether or not the coaching is right. Like, these are real things. These are real factors that are going to come into the conversation of what to do with Shedeur.
Well, I mean, it's even going to come into play. Will he play? We've seen it twice. Once in my era with John Elway, where he threatened to play baseball instead of go to the Colts. And then I was at the draft with Greeny when Eli Manning, refused to play for the Chargers and ended up with the Giants. So we know that Deion carries some weight as far as speaking up with the star that he was. Does he get into? I don't worry so much after the fact of after Shedeur's on a team. I worry about the draft process, and because I look, there's, as far as teams that need quarterbacks, I just did a quick list. The Jets, the Browns, Las Vegas, the Giants, Carolina. Are they going to try Bryce Young again? Are they going to go for a quarterback? And I don't know if there's enough quarterbacks that are first round worthy, but we know it's an overdrafted position. I don't think Deion is going to the NFL, so I don't think there's a package deal to worry about. I do think there is the worry of Shedeur being drafted, because he is going to get drafted high, of being drafted if Deion and Shedeur think that's the right team to go to, that they could cause a stir. But I do not think, Mike and Jason, that Deion is going to the NFL. Certainly the package deal, and it's complete sports talk fodder of both of them going to the Cowboys is laughable. That Dak Prescott is there making a lot of money. That's not going to happen. And I do not think Deion is going to the NFL.
No, and I don't think he'd last even that long. Right now, Tankathon has the Cowboys with the 9th pick in the draft at this point. The number 1 pick at this point would be held by the Jacksonville Jaguars. And then it's Tennessee, needs a quarterback more than likely. Cleveland needs a quarterback. The Giants needs a quarterback. The Raiders needs a quarterback. And then you get to the New England Patriots before you've got the Jets at 7. And so, Jason, this is the other part of this and the complication of everything you just described here, people trying to weigh the cost-benefit analysis. for a quarterback class that also, in most people's estimation, doesn't have a guy who would be in the top spot in this class who would have probably cracked the top 5 or 6 of last year. And so we had 6 quarterbacks go in the first round last year, and there were some people, myself included, that were a little hesitant when we started getting to Bo Nix for the Denver Broncos or Michael Penix Jr. being taken at 8th to back up in Atlanta. This year, I think, is going to be that times 10 in terms of being a little bit uncomfortable with the investment you're making relative to the talent level that we're seeing this year.
Well, and this, guys, is part of why if Dion wants to come in and say, you can't draft my kid. Okay. Like, I'm not trying to be callous towards where Shedeur is, but Shedeur is not at the level of where Eli or John Elway were when they were drafted respectively. He might be the best quarterback in this class, but this is a weak class at the quarterback position. And part of the reason, we have to remember that NFL teams scout the quarterback position in 2-year windows. So part of the reason that teams were willing to reach last year for Michael Penix Jr. or, in the eyes of some, reach for a Bo Nix wasn't just because they loved him. It's because they also scouted the position and knew that this year's class wasn't going to have that guy. I think we have to acknowledge, whether you love Shedeur or whether you love Cam Ward, taking either of those players, and I think they're both going to be top 3 picks. I think 2 and 3 quarterbacks. Yeah. If Jacksonville picks first, I think you're going to have to pick 2nd and 3rd to get quarterbacks. To be clear, I think those 2 guys would be the 2nd and 3rd pick in the NFL draft. And I think if this were a sane, normal NFL draft, they'd both be 22nd and 23rd. It's that big of a difference this year.
The only problem with what you're saying, Jason, is they aren't to the level of a John Elway or an Eli Manning, who's eventually going to get in the Hall of Fame. But it doesn't matter. They're going to be drafted high. They're going to be considered the savior for that organization. And it all depends on what their grade is for a team that says this is, if Shedeur is the top graded guy, or Cam Ward, this is the top graded quarterback, so that's who we're going to go after. It doesn't matter that in a normal draft they would be 22nd or the 2nd round. It only matters about what team wants them and thinks that's the future of their team. And quite honestly, you look at the Denver situation with Elway, it worked. Denver ended up winning the Super Bowl with Elway. You look at the Eli Manning situation, it worked. Eli ended up winning 2 Super Bowls with the Giants. So while I agree Shedeur isn't of the grading that Eli or Elway is, to me, it doesn't matter if he's considered one of the top quarterbacks and is going to go in the top 5.
Yeah, and I agree with that totally, Mike. I think for me, what I fear is the long term of that. Like, there is this point where it feels to me like a team's going to look around and be like, well, like, look at my beloved Raiders. My beloved Raiders have to get a quarterback at some point. You were just at a spot where you got nothing. So you're going to take a stab in the dark. But that feels a little bit, when you're drafting that high in a draft, it feels a little bit like, well, we've been dating a long time. I guess we should get married. It's the time. How often does that actually lead to a successful marriage, right? Like, I guess we've been together for a while. Like, the Raiders are going to be on the clock, I think, with likely the 1st or 2nd pick in this year's draft. I don't think they win another game this year. So, and when they're sitting on the clock, it's going to be like, well, I guess we're taking Shedeur. That's who Mark wants, and we need a quarterback. But that's not the way you get the guy. Like, realistically, if you're a team like that and you're taking on Harbaugh and Herbert and Andy Reid and Patrick Mahomes and what looks like Sean Payton, and at this point, Bo Nix, who's turned into this great quarterback, like, okay, is Shedeur and whoever the coach is next year going to be the answer to take on those tag teams? I don't think so. So, like, you're right, it's inevitable, but it also, to me, looks like inevitably in 3 or 4 years when we're like, oh, this quarterback failed, what a first-round bust. I mean, there's a reason, because he just shouldn't have been drafted where he was drafted in the first place.
Especially when you're caught in the limbo. And the Raiders, you're right, Fitz, the penalty for missing out on a quarterback in last year's class. If you're the Raiders, who now have all this anxiety, because the other part of this is there's a very human element that comes with drafting Shedeur, because whether or not he's the player that some quarterbacks in past classes have been, he is a larger-than-life personality, the name and the aura that comes with that. If you're a Raiders franchise that's looking for a face outside of Max Crosby right now, and we know quarterback sells that better than any. If you're Mark Davis and company there, you already went into this season kind of punting on any improvement at that position. If you were to do that 2 years in a row, which could be smart team building, by the way, try and create a more hospitable surrounding for whoever comes next at quarterback there, and maybe try and bridge the gap with the veteran, ultimately is hard to sell when you're trying to maintain interest to some of these fan bases who are looking at you like, why haven't you figured out the quarterback position has so much ego associated with it, with fan bases, and feeling like, all right, we've got our guy, and that alleviates the stress. It gives people something to be excited about, and I do think that's a big factor in this.
And I had multiple people tell me before the draft that the Raiders offered as many as 3 first-round picks to Washington to move up. They wanted Jaden Daniels. They offered 3 first-rounders and more to move up. Multiple people told me that. Washington said no. And that's a part of this history, because you're right. You didn't get a quarterback last year. It's not because you didn't try. I mean, you can't make 2 people want a tango, right? So, like, you tried, and now you're stuck.
So that's going to be the difference. It's going to be the difference if a team tries to trade up and a team does trade back because they feel it is a weak class, right? Obviously, Washington had a great grade on Jaden Daniels, but I think you will find out when there's more teams in need of quarterbacks than there are quarterbacks to fill those needs on just what the grade is and how much are you willing to move up, to your point, Jason, of, well, we need a quarterback. He's supposedly the best one available. We'll take him, to actually giving away assets to move up to grab said quarterback.
Yeah, desperation, though, in my mind, doesn't make them better prospects. And I think that's the core of the conversation that we're having right now, of guys trying to get into the team picture for this upcoming NFL draft class here. I do want to pivot right now a little bit away from this, Jesse, because speaking of the team picture, we had a very interesting occurrence happen in the NBA last night that harkens us back to some of the best pictures in the history of sport, and I'd be remiss if we didn't get to this.
Yeah, so Russell Westbrook notched his 200th career triple-double, the most in NBA's history, and that was reminding us, James Harden also rewrote the history books. He took sole ownership of number 2 in the all-time made threes. So all this history making kind of has us thinking back, right, to the first iteration of the Thunder. If you look at a picture of that team, I mean, you'd be stunned at the success, right, that these guys have gone on to have. You got Kevin Durant. It's pretty crazy. So it just has us thinking about, like, other teams, perhaps, that have these crazy beginnings, and then everybody goes on to be super successful. So we can talk about the Thunder, and then, we can talk about in the NFL world, there's some pictures that also have blown up, and everybody in them has gone on to be crazy successful.
Yeah, no, I think this is a worthy entrant into the class photos that we see on a bunch of broadcasts for all these guys, right? And that old picture of the Oklahoma City Thunder when you had James Harden and Russell Westbrook and Kevin Durant and all these great players together under one roof is one that we watched, certainly age all those guys out like the end of a movie at the beginning. But Jason, where do they stack up for you against pictures like the Washington Commanders coaching staff where you had Shanahan, McVay, LaFleur, McDaniels, Raheem Morris, or even the 2015 Alabama coaching staff where you had Nick Saban, Kirby Smart, Steve Sarkisian, Lane Kiffin, Mario Cristobal in terms of future head coaches and stars in their respective jobs?
The thing of it is, with the NBA particularly, in a star-driven league, to realize that you are a secondary market and you had those stars at that time. And Mike, I remember at the time, we were all doing radio together. I remember asking, I think it was Bobby Marks, what's the cost of relevance? Because even worse than being bad in sports is becoming irrelevant. We could talk about coaching super teams, but when you had that team with Oklahoma City, you were relevant every single day. Look at how long it has taken Oklahoma City to get back to a point of relevance. And even with that new point of relevance they've accomplished, man, if you're an Oklahoma City fan, you're always going to look at that picture and like sing what might have been in the back of your mind. Like a senior, there's no way you don't look at that as a fan. You don't look at that and just get angry every time you see that picture.
Oh, without a doubt, seeing what those players have turned into. But as far as these lists, I look at the Saban tree of Kirby Smart, Steve Sarkisian, Lane Kiffin, Mario Cristobal, and Dan Lanning as the list that to the positive. And then there's the negative list of a coach who's walking into the Hall of Fame, and Bill Belichick, of you would think that his assistants would go on to incredible success. And they went on to failure after failure after failure, because it seemed like they tried to be too much like Bill Belichick instead of just taking some Bill Belichickian stuff and mixing it with their stuff. They tried to be Bill and not only failed, but for one of the all-time greatest head coaches, his assistants going out failed miserably, except for, save for Bill O'Brien, who won some division titles with the Texans. That you have to look as one of the worst coaching trees we're going on to have success.
No doubt. I mean, the Saban one reigned supreme because they won so much while he was there, and now you've had Kirby Smart go on to such acclaim too. But man, that Oklahoma City one, the fact that they've gotten from there back to now where you've amassed another group of incredibly young, talented players on this team, Sam Presti, take a bow, man. Fitzy, you take a bow. Thank you so much as always, brother. We'll talk to you next week, all right?
Gonna go get some deli mustard.
Okay. God help us.
Welcome back to GoJo and Golic. Jesse Cofield, Mike Golic Jr., and Mike Golic Sr. here with you. Guys, the 76ers problems just keep piling up, okay? Last night, Joel Embiid played his best game yet, but left the game twice. Paul George hurt his knee, and the Sixers dropped the game to the Ja Morant-less Grizzlies. So this just seems like a comedy of errors. Do we have any faith that the 76ers can get it right this season? What do we think?
Team's cursed. 76ers are cursed. There's no other way to look at it at this point. I don't know if we need to get Kyrie and the Sage back over here, which, by the way, we don't hear from him much anymore, which has become an interesting and probably appreciated turn in the way that we were hearing about him. But no, Dad, I mean, this one, it's all your worst fears. You finally get these guys on the court together, and forget losing the game. At this point, it's sort of immaterial. You're in for a penny, in for a pound in terms of going through the growing pains with losses at the beginning of this season. But now to have Paul George, again, another hyperextension as the injury involved in here while Joel Embiid still struggled, is just another sign of how flawed this probably was as a premise to begin with.
They have spent $700 million to put this team together. $700 million with the three big players. And Jared McCain, the rookie from Duke, is the guy that's playing the best ball. Maxey just comes back, shoots 3 of 13 in 20 minutes for 8 points. You mentioned Paul George hyperextending his knee, leaving the game. Embiid twice going down with a knee, still getting 35 points. But you want to talk about living on a wing and a prayer on when he's going to miss more time. It is not an if, it is a when. And you had to think the 76ers going into the game, no Ja Morant, our three guys playing for the first time together. This was going to be the start to turn the page to the winning, and it could not have gone worse. I put this team as one of the contending teams in the East. I was completely wrong. This team will be. I right now, I think it's more about putting the number of games that the big three actually play together during the year, which I think will probably be under 20 games together. I mean, it's been brutal.
Yep, and I mean, they'll probably, at some point in the season, right, we play out the long sample size for the NBA. What have we seen? Hey, they'll probably string a couple of those games together around, January, and get everyone hot and bothered before the trade deadline. We'll start talking about them in a weight class that they probably won't end up being in before ultimately the best predictor of future injury, past injury, rears its ugly head. And that sucks to think about because, again, we want to see this come together. But when even Tyrese Maxey has been dealing with injury at the beginning of this season, it just feels like there's something in the water right now for Philadelphia as they can just get no traction on this season. They've always got a nail in one of their tires. And it's created a really interesting conundrum overall that kind of fits into a league-wide trend, Jesse, that we've talked about here. Is some of the TV stuff for the NBA, and I get it, ratings aren't the thing to focus on for anything, but it's interesting to consider for a league that's had a regular season problem and feels like it found something last year in the NBA tournament. Still plenty of good stories. The Cavs have been awesome. The Boston Celtics have begun their championship defense, but I already looked ahead to seeing the 76ers are one of the teams playing on Christmas Day opposite the NFL. And as we watch those two leagues go to war for audiences, especially around a time of year that used to be theirs, seeing the 76ers team that they expected to be box office, sort of the way the NFL bet on the Jets and the Cowboys, not great for Adam Silver and the league office that are already having to field questions about their ratings.
Yeah, but you know what? We actually might have a solution to this conundrum, okay? Draymond Green, he has an idea, guys, and I think we should listen.
The ratings is low. We know Draymond name sparks buzz. We know that name carries weight. We know that's gonna get people riled up.
Controversy.
Hey, what? It was kind of confusing because he talks about how he's gonna get suspended because they need some, but that's counterintuitive to the point that Draymond Green brings in numbers. If he gets suspended, he's not bringing in numbers.
Yeah, I think either way, at this point, Draymond as the star power in the NBA name is kind of waning. We've had plenty of conversations about the Warriors so far to start this season, and they have all been Steph Curry-centric. And so I understand and appreciate that, but as the larger version of this salve for what we've seen for the ratings, Dad, I do think some of this is pretty easy to explain. It's the middle of football season like it always is. You had an election year this year. You had an incredible World Series matchup between the Dodgers and the Yankees. And all of this, I think, very naturally lends itself to this. The NBA is going to be fine. Ratings shouldn't be the way that you judge the joy that you feel around a sport that you like anyway. I don't think they're going to be losing out on TV money because of this. I do think some of the same issues they've had with a regular season that lacks oomph are still there, but I think the NBA Cup has been presented as an interesting solution to some of that. So overall, are you worried about this at all? Because I'm not.
No. And the Emirates Cup was up 71% in the first night in the second year from the first year. But I think a lot of that is not only did the players realize the Cup game was going on, but the fans did as well. I mean, when that in-season tournament started last year, nobody, including the players, knew when one of the games was going on, but it grew to be something. So was it the first night of the second Emirates Cup, or was it the fact that it was Clay against Curry, which was a great marketing, a great scheduling thing to have them in the first night? But no, overall, you mentioned the factors that are involved. And now that the NFL is on Christmas, even though it's streaming, it's a Netflix thing, it's still the big brother on the block. I mean, the NBA is never going to overtake the NFL, and I think they even realize that the NBA will have their ratings at the right time of the season.
They will. So I don't worry about them all that much. What I am interested from a television standpoint, and I was excited to talk about this today, was what the WNBA is trying to do in their offseason with this unrivaled league. So again, Breanna Stewart and Afisa Collier are two of the co-founders of a 3-on-3 league that's going to start in January of this year, January 17th. It's going to happen in Miami, and it's a made-for-TV spectacle, Dad. I heard David Sampson and John Skipper talking about this on Pablo Torre Finds Out. It seats less than 1,000 people. It is built specifically for this event to cater to the television audience. You'll have a more intimate on-site thing, but this is a licensed out thing with TNT where they're going to broadcast these games. But the big blow, because as on that podcast they were talking about the recruitment of Caitlin Clark, it was announced, according to a report telling ESPN, that Caitlin Clark will not play in that 3-on-3 unrivaled league. And there were reports that they were offering her a Messi-like level of influence in a league where all the players involved, all the women playing in this league where the average salary is expected to be around $250,000. There are other incentives, including equity in the league itself as it grows. That does take, I think, a bit of a hit without Caitlin Clark at least initially signing up to this, knowing what she does for eyeballs on this new product.
And listen, quite honestly, I get it from her side, taking a break, because it has been nonstop. She got the break during the Olympics, but then they went to the playoffs, and the money they're making, these players can't pass it up. But I have questions of will a 3-on-3 league make it, whether it's go to the men's side of Ice Cube trying to do the 3-on-3 to the Olympic 3-on-3 basketball to this. I just don't know, men's or women's side, the draw of 3-on-3 and how it's going to play out.
I think at the very least, this is trying to approach it in a unique way. Instead of, the 3-on-3 like you've got with the big three, you've got the legitimate stars of the current WNBA right now. And it's presented as sort of a solution for players that maybe don't want to go overseas anymore, to try and give them another option where they don't have to, which for most of the WNBA body of work, the meat of the bell curve there, that's how they supplement earnings in the offseason.
I think the setup is fantastic for the players. Don't get me wrong. I think it's great that they don't have to, go overseas, and it's a setup right here in the States for them to make money. I just don't know the draw that it's going to have. That's going to be my. I think it's a great thing to try. Well, Caitlin Clark.
But I think especially the draw without Caitlin Clark. And there'll be questions and conversation, I'm sure, about does she owe it to the rest of this league to try and continue to be the rising tide that lifts all ship. But this was probably always going to be a money question. And for Caitlin Clark, we know with the off-field endorsement deals and everything else, she's already got plenty of money. And so to your point, the offseason for her, the priority at this point in time. All right, time to finish off the show the way we always do. This, that, and the third. 3 quick stories to send you into the rest of the day. Make sure you download, subscribe, rate, and review us. Leave us a 5-star rating. Check us out here live Monday through Friday, 8 to 10 a.m. Eastern on the DraftKings Network. Our YouTube channel, which is getting close to 1,000 subscribers now. We appreciate you there. Go ahead and hit the button, smash the bell, do all the fun stuff. And if you miss us live or any of our great guests, shout out to our buddy Jason Fitz, host over at Yahoo Sports, who was kind enough to stop by in the second hour of the show. You can catch that wherever you get the podcast or right here as soon as we get done on YouTube. Guys, let's start off with this. We were talking about the WNBA, the unrivaled league. Expansion is on the mind right now for women's basketball, and that might actually translate to more for the WNBA. Kathy Engelbert, the commissioner, said she hopes to grow the league to 16 teams by 2028 as women's sports continues its growth. And it appears that Cleveland, Dad, might actually, your hometown, get in on this. Dan Gilbert, the owner of the Cavaliers specifically, wants to bring a WNBA team there. And I think this is a sign, Dad. We've said for a while, sports is a really hard market for some of these more veteran products like the NBA and the NFL to get into on the ownership side because they're already at these massive valuations. The WNBA represents one of the last spots in professional sports where growth is still really possible. And so I think you're seeing a lot of these wealthy people looking around and going, this is a legitimate business opportunity that we can get in on now. So how would you feel about a WNBA squad? You could have your WNBA team the way you have your Cleveland Cavaliers and your Cleveland Guardians now on the show.
Yeah, it's exactly right. They have Cleveland has 3 of the big 4, doesn't have an NHL team. It has an American Hockey League team, the Monsters. But I think it would be great. So right now the WNBA has 12 teams, so they're talking about an expansion of 4 by 28. It's been a league that we have seen first rounders get cut, like there just wasn't enough space for teams. So I think they are ripe for expansion because the popularity of women's sports, especially basketball, has been rising. So now is the time, I think, to strike while the iron is hot. And I think Cleveland would be a great place to have a WNBA team. But I think it's a smart move to expand, to have obviously more roster space.
Remember, the WNBA's 13th franchise, the Golden State Valkyries, will kick off in 2025, followed by Toronto and then Portland, who are awarded the 14th and 15th franchises this year. And so as they search for a 16th franchise, other places potentially throwing their hat in the ring, Denver, Miami, Milwaukee, St. Louis, Philadelphia, all great sports towns that would wrap their arms, I'm sure, around this product. And to your point, Dad, there was a great documentary, 144, on the difficulty of making it in a league with such few roster spots for so many quality players. And so to continue to expand and give more opportunities to more players, awesome and a great sign of health for that league. Jesse, let's get to that. One of the places that has produced many players in the WNBA got to celebrate its coach as now the all-time great.
Yeah, a record-breaking night in college basketball. So Gina Auriemma is now the sole owner of most wins in coaching history with 1,217. You guys, that's the most in NCAA history. Men, women, any division. Absolutely unreal for him. Like, just an incredible career. He's still going, but look at him.
Yeah, Dad, it's. I mean, we grew up in Connecticut for the majority of my life, right? We got there in 1998 when your job with ESPN took us there. And during that run, being Notre Dame fans in Central Connecticut was not a great time watching Gino Auriemma and really the men's and women's programs at UConn as dominant. But he is one of the faces of this sport and for so long was the premier program of the sport and still is now. Paige Beckers, who is already signed with that unrivaled league and is expected to have a Caitlin Clark sort of last year in stores, just another in a long line of players, many of whom who were in-house for this event who got to celebrate their head coach.
I lost many bets to Rebecca Lobo on UConn playing Notre Dame during that heyday. 11 national titles, 23 Final Four berths, including 15 in the last 16 seasons, 6 undefeated season, separate win streaks of 98 and 111 games. Gino could go down as the greatest coach of all time. And a coach who turned out the most greatest players of all time in a sport. I mean, we're literally, you have to talk about that for what he's done. And I remember when UConn was just dominating everything and people would ask him, is this bad for the sport? You know, what should be done? And his, basically, I loved it. His answer was, hey, play better, get better. you know what? We're not coming down to your level. We need more teams to come up to our level. It was a very simple solution. Friggin' play better. And he's right. He's right. You got to get better players and you have to play better. But I make the argument. Who's a better all-time coach? I know there's obviously the list of Wooden and Coach K, but I mean, Gino has every right to, and now he wouldn't do it personally, but for his players to say he's the greatest coach of all time.
Yeah, I think in when you think of women's college basketball traditionally, and by the way, the name he passed was Tara Vanderveer, the legendary coach at Stanford, who was the all-time wins leader before that, who had passed Mike Krzyzewski. I really think in women's college basketball, historically, for a lot of people, it would be Gino Auriemma or Pat Summitt, who both were rivals for so long, and obviously that was a really heated rivalry, the late Pat Summitt. And so I think those would probably be the names that come up. But you're right, he's absolutely in that. And to your point about the challenge to the rest of the sport, they answered the bell. Like, since then, we've seen what Dawn Staley has made South Carolina into. You had Muffet McGraw at Notre Dame. You had Kim Mulkey at her multiple stops along the way now. And so you've seen the rest of the sport and what it's become. The fact that you could have a Caitlin Clark lift Iowa to the places that program were as well. It's seen where the sport has gone to these heights, but for so long, it was led. So congratulations to Gino Auriemma for making it happen. Let's get to the third, Jesse, for someone that really made it happen yesterday. Congrats on the sex, Adam Schefter. Good Lord.
Yeah, so during the latest episode of the ESPN podcast, This is Football with Kevin Clark, Clark asked Adam Schefter what was the weirdest place that he ever broke news, and Shefty did not hold back, okay? He said he remembered being in Denver one time, and then he was like, how do I say spending time with a woman for the first time? So basically, he had sex, congrats on the sex, and then he rolled over and broke news, which is just, I mean, we all had to believe that's happened before for these insiders who were just always breaking news, but really to hear him say it out loud was something special for us.
Do we have the sound of this, by the way? The Adam Schefter bleep-eating grin on his face while he was making this happen. Can we see this?
How do I say this? I had just spent time with this woman for the first time.
Yeah. Okay.
And
sure.
And got a text that Dale Carter was being suspended. I think it was for 8 games for substance abuse. And so as I continue to lay there, confirm it, and got the job done, Kevin, in every which way.
He got the job done. You know what I mean?
Not even a humble brag. I mean, not even a humble brag. That was just a flat out planting the flag, right?
Yep.
I mean, yeah.
I mean, does Adam Schefter has to own one of those FBI shirts that says female body inspector on it at some point, right? Like, that was that level of, and you know what, listen, more power to Schefter. What I appreciated most about that clip, honestly, wasn't the, sexual innuendo, because I saw Jake Glazer later on tweeted something of like, who among us hasn't? And now I'm sure we're going to get every insider trying to throw their sexual bona fides in the timeline. But Adam Schefter with the Sean McVay level of photographic memory of not just, I broke news one time while I was having sex or after I was having sex. It was, no, I remember the specific player and the specific story that I broke here that to me is so impressive about a guy who's broken so many stories over the years.
And talk about it on the road, right? In Denver, and he had said that he had sex for the first time with this woman. So did he just meet her? I mean, he's just one time in it. I mean,
Jeff, you got a roster.
A lot of questions to be asked, and I'm sure, he thinks his phone blows up when he breaks news, but I'm sure his wife had a few things to say to him after that podcast came out. So, yeah. His phone was really blowing
Jeffy
up
got
then.
home and said, Alexa, play Freaky Girl by Gucci Man. It's mommy daddy time.
Oh, God. Oh, God. Please don't put that visual. Okay.
I mean, I didn't put the visual out there. Shefty put the visual, and you saw Kevin Clark had no idea what to do with that. He was beside himself. And you know what I say to the rest of America? Now you know how I felt, having for years to listen to Mike and Mike play the porn bed music when my dad would talk about coming home and doing God knows what. So download, subscribe, rate, and review the podcast. Don't talk about my parents doing it. Thanks so much. We'll talk to you tomorrow.